What's up, Joe? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Sports 360. I'm Jeff Fennell, and I'm here with Rob Duran of Rob Duran Sports. Rob, how you doing today?
I've had better days, Jeff. Had better days.
I think that is the sentiment, Rob, of a lot of baseball fans. As we're recording this is Tuesday, and the CBA negotiations between Major League Baseball and the Players Association have broke down without a deal being reached, despite a deadline of February 28th, which was yesterday. It was extended until 5 o'clock today, and shortly around 4:15 or so, it was announced that there would be no deal. And Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, has since announced that the first two series of the regular season have been canceled. So, for a lot of baseball fans all across the country and beyond, this is not a good day.
Not at all, man. It's a dark, dark day for the sport of baseball, and we'll see what happens moving forward. But for now, man, it's a lot of raw emotion. I would say that the baseball community is feeling at this moment.
And Rob, I mean, the negotiations have been going on for quite a while. I mean, they started over a year ago. It picked up in earnest over the summer and into the fall. We know that December 2nd, upon the expiration of the CBA, Major League Baseball instituted a lockout, and the players have been locked out ever since. They continue to be locked out. Um, for 6 weeks after the lockout, Major League Baseball did not reach out to the Players Association or to the players to try to resume negotiations. And then negotiations did resume in mid January, sort of at a slow pace, but they certainly picked up over the last week as the sides were in Florida. And they pretty much negotiated, Rob, around the clock for 9 days in a row, but could not reach an agreement. And there's still some, you know, uh, issues obviously that need to be resolved: the competitive balance tax, minimum salaries, and a few other issues. But you know, the frustration I think that a lot of fans feel, and I know a lot of players feel, having worked with players on this, is that you know the negotiations didn't really turn serious until recently. And here we are, February now turning into March. And that was a gambit that has proven to be unsuccessful. And now we have regular season games being canceled.
Yeah, and you make a great point there. Where the negotiations didn't heat up until this past week. And like you mentioned earlier, in December, the beginning of December, the league imposed lockout was put in place. The Rob Manfred released a letter to the fans, is what he called it, basically saying that the lockout was put in place to jumpstart negotiations. And 6 weeks passed, and there were no talks. There's a lot of reports that the union was trying to get things going, but the league side was not having it. And you sit here today and you see, you hear what Commissioner Manfred said during his press conference, and he also released a letter as well today, basically restating the entire press conference. And he says, basically, wish we had more time to get something done. And it's like, wait a minute. There were 6 weeks in between the day it was locked out to the day you guys started negotiating with the players. Those 6 weeks could have been used, and we wouldn't be in this situation right now. The league set this deadline of February 28th, which was yesterday. And then they set the deadline, extended it to today to 5 p.m. And, when you hear that, oh, wish we had more time or something of that nature, you think back to December 2nd when when Manfred said, the lockout was put in place to jumpstart negotiations, and so much time passed without anything happening. It's just frustrating.
Right. And I think the frustration that you feel and you just expressed is what a lot of fans of Major League Baseball feel. And I know a lot of the players feel the same way, that a lot of time was wasted, that some of the negotiation that was going on really was not negotiation, and that things didn't get serious until the last week to 10 days. And you know um one of the things that Rob Manfred said at his press conference, which was true, was that both sides tried, I guess. He detailed all the things that Major League Baseball did. Hey, we gave them this. We were willing to do this. We did the universal DH. We raised the minimums. We offered the minimum to be 700. It was 570 last year. And he ticked off all these things. But, on the players' side, the players, agreed to expanded playoffs. They backed off of certain things that the owners, um, did not want, like, changes to revenue sharing. They backed off on, the demands for increased arbitration. At first, they wanted all players with 2 years to have salary arbitration rights. They backed off, and they even backed off on increasing the number of Super 2 players. So, there were efforts made to try to get a deal done, but it seems that the sticking point, or one of them, is the competitive balance tax,
Hmm.
which, in many ways operates as a soft cap because there are so many teams that are not willing to go over the cap because they don't want to pay the tax associated with exceeding the salary threshold. And so for players, they believe that number needs to move up because it did not move up much in the last CBA. It needs to move up appreciably, players feel, because of the way industry revenues have grown, right? And there needs to be some correlation between the growth of revenue and the increase in the threshold. That's not unreasonable to make that correlation. And MLB has said, well, we'll go from 210 or 214 to 220 on the first year of the thresholds. And they want to stay there for 3 years and then go up to 224 and then go up to 230, and the players are saying no. Players are starting at 238. So that's a pretty big gap, right? And and then the players go up from there from 238. So there's a lot of room to cover there to come to some kind of an agreement, but you know it's it's just one of those things. I mean, there was no guarantee that a deal was going to get done today, and I think there was some what turned out to be false hope put out last night, by certain people that, hey, the sides are close to a deal. And there were really some real work to get done today. And as we've seen, they weren't able to bridge the gap. And so here we are.
Yeah, and you make good points on the CBT acting like a soft cap, because that essentially that's what a lot of teams are using it as. And I can speak to this as a Yankee fan. The Yankees have been operating that way for a few years now, where even just last year making the trade for Gallo and Rizzo, they gave up more prospect capital in order for the Cubs and Rangers respectively to cover the salaries of those players, of Joey Gallo and Anthony Rizzo, that they received in return. So they gave up more prospects to have that salary covered, to not go over that $210 million luxury tax or threshold. Um, and it's just not okay, because when you look at, speaking about revenues and all that stuff, in the statements that are being released by the league, and Manfred talking about it, they say that the last 5 or so years have been difficult for MLB owners. But when you look at the revenue that MLB generates, they've continued to go up, and I think this is like the 17th straight year that revenue has gone up, and through 2019, which is the last year prior to COVID, it's gone up every year for 17 straight years through 2019, up to 10.7 billion, which is a record for the league. And a 30% increase in revenue, meanwhile player salary continues to go down. And you know, something has to give at some point. And I know that it's negotiations, but I think the threshold, the CBT threshold, does have to be a situation where it's not a fixed number every year. I think what the owners and the league is proposing, keeping it at 220, while yeah, it looks nice the first year where you go up from that 210 to 220, remaining at 220 for the next couple of years and then just slightly going up after that, I don't think that really does make the change that we want to see in Major League Baseball as fans and as the players. They want to see their teams be competitive and spend money in order to be competitive.
Right. That's right. And as you said, as revenues continue to go up, and also too as franchise values continue to go up, that this means that the industry is healthy financially,
Hmm.
right? And yes, everybody took a hit for COVID, no doubt about that. But the industry is relatively healthy. As you said, the increases year over year in revenue, the continued increases in franchise values. And then for the last 4 years, players seeing the average salary go down in each of those years. Something's wrong with that picture.
Yeah.
Something's wrong with that picture, right? And so players are trying to address that. Now, what was part of, you know, the agreed upon areas was a pre-arbitration bonus pool for those players who are not yet eligible for arbitration but who perform at a high level. There's an opportunity to get some additional money. There's even a gap on that as well, Rob, because players wanted that pool to be 115 million. Owners started out at 10 million. They did get it up to 30 million as of today, but the players were at 85 million. So there's a $55 million gap that remains as it concerns that pre-arbitration bonus pool. That's a pretty big gap to deal with as well. And so, in addition to CBT, you also have the pre-arbitration bonus pool as a major issue that's out there, and um, that's an important topic for the union because they've stated from the very beginning that one of their goals is to get younger players paid earlier in their career consistent with the value that they're creating, meaning that if you're having players going out there who are generating you know top-notch production, even though they're not arbitration eligible, they should be paid for that production um, through this bonus pool. And right now there's a major gulf that exists between the two sides on that point.
Yeah, and that's actually something that I've talked to just friends, talking to my friends about it, how teams have these younger talents, the 0 to 3 year talents that come up and they light up the world. But then they're getting paid, essentially the bare minimum that you can pay a player. And you look at the production they're putting on the field, the attraction they are off the field. That's revenue being generated for the team. Yet these players are not being compensated for that, at least fairly. And it's not right. These players should have the opportunity of, if you're going out there your rookie year or your second year in the league and you're bashing 40 home runs and you're lighting up the world and everybody's paying money to see you, whether you're home or away. They're here to see, that player on that team. That's revenue being generated, buying that jersey, all that stuff. And the player is not reaping the benefits of that. And that's just not okay. In any way you look at it, it's just not fair. It's not okay.
Right. That's right. And so I think, many times, these negotiations, whether it's in baseball or football, basketball or hockey, many times they're characterized as millionaires and billionaires fighting. And the truth is that as baseball has skewed younger and younger, that means that you have more and more players who are making at or around the minimum salary. And last year, the minimum salary was $570,000, not millions of dollars, 570,000. And when you have half or maybe even more than half of players in Major League Baseball now making around that amount, this everybody's not a millionaire. And
Yeah.
players are looking to get a fairer slice of the pie. Um, and who doesn't want that as a worker, as someone providing services, talent, and so forth. And so that's what's at issue. Um, but no agreement, and so right now there's postponement of games. But going back to the other point that we mentioned, Rob, there's a lot of frustration at the amount of time that has been wasted. And then, as is typical of this industry, notorious for not getting anything done unless there's a deadline. It's just a notorious part of the baseball industry. And so a deadline was set and it didn't work, Rob. It did not
Yeah.
work. And now we have games that are lost. And so there's a lot of frustration of saying it didn't have to play out this way. But again, who orchestrated this? Who locked out the players? Who
Yeah.
didn't, resume negotiations until 6 weeks after the lockout? How
And
is that a jump start?
exactly. And as a fan, and allow me to be a little bit unfiltered here, what it showed me is that the owners did not have a mindset, at least from my point of view, did not have the mindset to come to an agreement at all. At least not according to the deadlines they're setting. It may, it's funny you bring up the deadline stuff because it is how MLB operates, and you know, losing out on games does not affect the revenue or the profits for the owners at the start of the season. Because when you look at when baseball starts, there is the March Madness, the NBA is still going on. There's a lot of stuff happening still outside of baseball that people are tuning into. So once baseball heats up, which is the summer months, that's when you see the real revenue generation, and then in the playoffs in October. So for me, from this perspective, it looks like the owners had no intention of getting a full season in, had no intention of getting this agreement done because they can recoup the money that they're going to lose now and double, maybe triple it come October when the playoffs start. And it's unfortunate from a fan's perspective to see that and see that so much time was wasted because a lot of the story that you heard today from the league side was the fans. We're doing this for the fans. We were hoping for the fans. If you really cared about the fans, you wouldn't have lost those 6 weeks. You wouldn't have said, we're going to lock everyone out and jumpstart. You didn't jumpstart anything. You shut the league down and went home, went through the holidays, enjoyed your vacations, and then came back and tried to win a PR battle almost, what it felt like on social media, and kind of push the blame on the players for stuff not getting done by the deadline. And it's unfortunate that we're here because it almost feels like a story of greed from the owner's side, and baseball continues to be at the end of every joke when it comes to stuff like this. And this situation for me is it's no different, and it's embarrassing as a fan of the sport and someone who covers the sport. It's embarrassing that we are here in this situation today.
And one last thing, Rob, to pick up on your point about, the owners not necessarily being concerned about those early games is, there's been a fair amount of reporting on, that MLB was prepared to lose a month of the season. And I believe part of that is one that gates attendance in the ballpark is not as important as it used to be to
Mm,
club revenue, because now it's about television rights and other
yeah.
associated rights and sponsorships and all those types of things. And so, gate revenue is not the driver that it used to be back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It's different now, the way revenue is generated. And then in addition to that, my understanding is that baseball, in as part of its television contracts, um, will get full freight, get the full rights payments, even if they don't provide a full 162 games of inventory, right? That they can maybe provide 140 or 145 games. So if you have a cushion before you start losing some of that television money, what's your rush to try to get
Exactly.
something done, especially when gates aren't driving revenue? And so I think when you look at this, it kind of explains why it seems as if there was no real sense of urgency after this lockout, which was designed to jumpstart negotiation. There was no sense of urgency to start negotiating because it was, well, if we lose some games early in the season, we will still get paid as owners through our television contracts, but the players won't get paid because they're not playing. That's
Yeah,
what it seems like when you look at this in a broader picture and see how this has played out over the last several months. So, um, look, there's been a lot of gamesmanship here, but in the end, it hasn't worked, and now we're in a pickle. And we'll see what happens, Rob, because now games are being missed, and if there's not a quick resolution, then more and more games will be missed. And as you said, that's too bad.
yeah. It won't be good. Let's just put it that way. It won't be good for the sport, and it's just not a good look, man. It's just not.
Yeah. Switching gears real quick, another baseball story that's not a good look is the story coming out of Miami, where Hall of Famer Derek Jeter, New York Yankee, your guy, one of your guys, um, he had an ownership stake in the Marlins, but yesterday, he stepped down, and he relinquished his shares, or sold his shares back, or got his shares back, however you want to say it. But he's now no longer part of the Marlins franchise. He was the CEO of the Marlins. He had a 4% ownership stake in the team. He had a 5-year contract as CEO, and he'd been there for 4 years. It doesn't seem like it was 4 years, Rob, but he was there for 4 years.
I know.
And he released a statement yesterday that had a very interesting line in it. He actually, two sentences. He said, "The vision for the future of the franchise is different than the one I signed up to lead. Now is the right time for me to step aside as a new season begins." And what that clearly sounds like is that the vision that the franchise is now putting forward is not the one he said was presented to me and what led me to sign up on this deal in the first place. Because something about Jeter. Anybody who knows Jeter wants to win.
Yep.
That's it. He just wants to win. And he probably knew that he was going to have to lose for a while in Miami, but that there was a commitment of winning. And we've seen now reports coming out that he thought there would be, 10 to $15 million available to spend for some additional players after the lockout was over. And it seems now the team had gone back on that. And so for Jeter, he's saying, you guys aren't as committed to winning as I am. I'm out of here. And he's
Yeah,
gone.
and listen, if I was in his shoes, as great as it would be to be an owner of a team, and that's always been his dream. He's always said it. Play shortstop for the Yankees, own a baseball team. I would walk away as well if I was in that position. Like you said, Derek Jeter is synonymous with winning. That's it. He's, God rest his soul, he's the Kobe Bryant of baseball. Those two guys were exactly the same, competitive, trying to win. That's it. Nothing else mattered. And when you're given or you're put in this role, and people criticize, a lot of the moves he made as CEO and running the baseball ops. I thought he did a great job of rebuilding that franchise from the bottom up. Yeah, it took some, slashing of payroll when he traded Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees and stuff like that. But the return that they got for trading a lot of these guys, the Christian Yelich, the Marcelo Zunas, obviously Giancarlo Stanton, et cetera, they built a foundation. They rebuilt that farm system, and they have some good talent at the major league level, especially in the pitching, in the rotation now. And they're reaping the benefits of the moves that he orchestrated when he first got there over these last 3 to 4 years. And then to move to this point where it's like, okay, we got the rotation, we got the farm system, let's add some veteran talent, let's spend some money, and let's start winning games. They were in the playoffs. Granted, it was the COVID season, shortened season and all that stuff, but they made the playoffs. You have some momentum going. Why not continue to build on that? Continue to spend money that is available that you guys have to continue to build that team. It's not like the NL East is this juggernaut division. Yeah, you have the Braves that just won the World Series, but they struggled throughout the season. The Nationals struggled. The Mets, sorry, Jeff, the Mets, but they have their struggles as well. Same
That's
thing with the
right.
Phillies. So why not make a move? And especially when you have the 2 wild cards and all that stuff. And you may have known that expanded playoffs were coming and all this stuff. You know what I mean? Why not make the move, spend the money to improve that franchise, improve the team, and get that team back to a respectable status? And when that wasn't happening, Derek Jeter did what Derek Jeter is going to do. If you're not committed to winning, well, I'm not committed to you.
Yeah. I mean, and as you said, they made some moves, early on, and even in this off season, they made some moves. Um, Signing Avisel Garcia, trading for Joey Wendell, and bringing over Jacob Stallings, Gold Glove catcher from Pittsburgh. So they made some moves, right, to improve the team. But again, Jeter thought there was some additional moves to be made. Um, and Jeter just we said it before, he just wants to win. And it's not about being good enough or just being better. He wants to be the best. It's about winning
Yeah.
the World Series. And so yeah, and and to be the only African American owner, even though he only had a 4% stake, but still he had an ownership stake in the team. Hall of Famer, icon of the game, and to lose him. I mean, and not only you mentioned the players and everything else, and he also brought in Kim Ng as the first female
Yes.
GM. You know what I mean? And so he was doing some things in that in Miami and with that franchise. And again, he's an icon who is now stepped away from the game. And you would have to think he's going to resurface at some point and be a prominent figure in the game once again, but it remains to be seen in what capacity. But that's another big story on this week. And it again, and that's not a good story for Major League Baseball. And now with the failed negotiations, the last 2 days for Major League Baseball have been anything but good. So um, we're obviously going to keep we're obviously going to keep an eye on this story, Rob. We're going to come back again. There's going to be a lot to talk about here, but we'll wrap it up at this point, knowing that we may be back real soon talking about the latest on the lockout in Major League Baseball, the cancellation of opening day, and the first week of the season. Um, Sad time for baseball fans like yourself.
Yeah. And listen, if the Steinbrenners feel like selling the Yankees, I hope Derek Jeter jumps on it.
Yeah,
I would not mind.
yeah. He'll be back. He will
He
be
will.
back.
I
He'll
think
be
the game
back.
needs him. The game needs him. You can argue he's still the most popular baseball player there is right now. So
Right. Yeah.
the game needs
E
him.
Yeah. And the game also needs to get back on the field, and hopefully we will see that happen. But right now, negotiations have broken down, and no indication yet when they will resume. But let's stay on top of it, Rob. And as things develop, let's come back and talk about it, analyze it, and offer our take on the latest. So, all right, brother. Listen, you be good, and we will be talking soon, I believe, as we get back to covering one of the biggest stories in Major League Baseball in quite some time. But until then, brother, take care, all right?
Thank you, Jeff. Take care, man.